Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Large Blast Podcast, best Warhammer 40 podcast around. It's me, your best friend, your host, your dad, Stony, and I'm joined, as always, by Welshie,
Incy Wincy Spider.
and Matt.
Arise, phlegm man.
And we're here today to talk about the spider, Fabius Bile. But before we get into that, we kick things off with a little something we call Hobbies Goings On, where we take a look into what's been going on hobby-wise in the hosts' lives. So, Matt, do you want to get us kicked off with this?
Yeah, I'll kick it off. I haven't done anything.
Easy peasy, nice and easy.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't done. March and February have been very unproductive, but I'm hoping that will change soon. And it's kind of, sometimes I've kind of felt sad that I've missed the introduction, really, of the old world and all the excitement and the hubbub. But then, like we said before, I have to remember that some of these old world models are 30 years old. They're not going anywhere. I don't need to worry. The rule book is mine. I can play it in 30 years' time. Games Workshop doesn't need to dictate how we play the game. So
fast forward to episode 600.
Yeah.
Oh, it's me, Matt. I've just painted one of those original Bretonian knights from 2024.
I've finally finished my Bretonian army and ready to field it. Look. Right then, Welshie, what have you been up to?
Well, I've cut away all of those nice Inquisitor-esque models you've designed, Stoney, from the sprues, ready to go. So I'll be base coating those this week.
Release them from their resin tombs.
Yeah. It's I find it quite therapeutic, actually. It's more therapeutic than sprues for some reason. I think it's because you've got the added risk of accidentally cutting a bit because it's a little bit tighter in there,
Definitely. Like when you get down to the fiddly bits, it's kind of sometimes they're okay and you can rip big sections of it off sometimes.
I was just going to say, when you get a big bit, that's really nice to
But sometimes it becomes, when it gets into the fiddly bits, it's a bit like that bomb doing. It's like, was that the red wire? Is that the green wire? Is it like is that a tube I need, or is that a strut? So you can get a bit fiddly.
So I've got those prepped ready to go soon. And Sunday I actually played a little game with my mate. Was down from London. Well, the three of us and him and some others went to see some nice spooky heavy metal-esque creeper on Saturday night, and then Sunday we had a nice hungover game of boarding actions with my mate. So we played some inquisitorial henchmen versus some gene stealer cults in the bows of a ship. And it's pretty good. It's nice and easy to pick up. If you've played Warhammer before, but you've kind of fallen out of the rules, you've only got 4 units. I gave him the list and he was basically on top of it. So if you are listening to this, trying to get mates into 40k, boarding actions is definitely the place to start. Don't get tricked by Kill Team because the models are beautiful. Just play some boarding actions. It's easy.
All right. Cool. What is boarding actions for the uninitiated like myself?
It's that. Do you remember the Arcs of Omen games they brought out where it's all in corridors in the ship, so it looks like Space Hulk.
Oh yeah. Oh, I remember us talking about this actually. Yeah. Yes, I do. Yeah.
Straight up played a game of it's 500 point 40k in a ship, so lots of the terrain rules and stuff don't matter. If you can't see down the corridor, you can't shoot. There's only 4 objectives. There's doors that open and close, but other than that, it's pretty streamlined.
Sweet.
Because you can only take certain units, it's just a lot less complicated and a lot more fun and quick.
Well, that sounds good. Sounds like a good way to dip your toe into 40k if that's what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. So, Stoney, what's up next? You got those Noise Marines finished that you've been designing on ZBrush?
Oh, God, has it become that predictable, has it? It really has, isn't it? I've been doing this for so fucking long. Yeah, I've got the Noise Marines going. At the moment, I've got some printing at the moment, actually, some test prints. I've got my 4 going. I'm working on my Lucas, the quite often model, to go with them. But yeah, when you're at this stage and you're doing test prints and stuff, you've got to get all the poly count down. This is lame now, but you've got all the polys on there, all the different pixels. And when you're sculpting stuff, you want fucking loads of polys so you can really put detail in. And then towards the end, to make them processable by printing programs and stuff, you've got to try to take all the polys out again. So So I've been doing that by a process called decimation, and
Oh,
it's quite funny because obviously you went to go and see Creeper at the weekend, and one of the things, because I've been doing this today, is like one of the things you have to do is you have to go to the decimation master on ZBrush, and that's kind
You
of
have
like
to
the
bow
tool
down to them, and
that's
like,
it. And I'm really hoping that someone out there, because you can get plugins for ZBrush, and I'm just really hoping that someone out there can make a plugin for ZBrush that every time you click the decimation master thing, it plays a little like some shit like that,
yeah.
Yeah. So apart from that, not a whole lot. Although I was thinking as well, like a couple of, I don't know if I talked about this actually, but a couple of months ago, it must be around Christmas, someone contacted me about, do you remember years ago when I was making the Gene Stealer Cult limo?
yeah,
And I did a version on ZBrush, and I said I'd give away the file because it was too big for my printer to print, so I could never I was never able to print that because it was just
Yeah.
like I've never had access to a printer big enough to print it. And someone contacted me and said, "Oh, is that file still available?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, wicked." So I sent him the file, and I haven't heard anything. So if you're out there and you did manage to print it, that would be cool. But then I was
there's
also
some guy out
thinking,
there. He's scaled it up. He's got a giant. He's out there driving it
Yeah.
around.
he's
That's
driving
the-
it around. Fuck me, yeah. Oh, that's sick as hell. But like, I was thinking to myself, oh, maybe after this one, because it would be super. Like, I keep taking on this. You know, this isn't my job. Like, is to make fucking minis. So like, and it takes so fucking long. So it's just kind of like, oh, maybe like it would be quite nice to just actually just do like nice Gene Stealer Cult limo, go back to my roots, make something I actually really want, and kind of
Yeah, nice.
you know, and
Yeah.
print it. So yeah, so that's kind of and make a video for it and do all of that good shit as well. So yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. So get ready, because that's if people are listening to this, if you're finding our work through the videos and you're trying to buy the models, then fair enough, you can buy them. But maybe I'll give you a little secret code for listeners of the podcast where you can get. If you just send us an
Ooh.
email, I'll just send it to you for free. Make good on that promise from all those years
right.
ago. That
That's
only
a good
one
idea.
person has taken me up on. So yeah, we'll see.
Finance, cutting edge technology. Accurate information is the Large Blast podcast news. Hear every episode.
We've all heard of estate agents, but Imperial agents? What? That's right, there's been a big leak. Codex Imperial agents is what everybody's talking about. This is your Inquisitors. This is your random servitors that have kind of come to life somehow. This is all that kind of cool shit, right? What's going on with Imperial servants?
Well, this was a leak that I first saw. Shout out to Auspex Tactics, but I don't know where the original file came from. But it's a picture with what looks to be some pages at a print shop, ready to be kind of test printed and folded up into a codex. And everyone's screaming, could the next codex, that redacted one they've had secret for ages on the website, is it going to be Imperial agents? And I think it's really exciting because from these pages, you can't work out much, but there's certainly an Inquisitor. There's certainly a page that says Navigators. There's a page that says Rogue Traders. There's a page that says Banish the Demon. And if you notice, that Banish the Demon page we're looking at on the right also has the Grey Knight symbol above it. Could we finally be getting a codex that has Grey Knights, Death Watch, and the Imperial agents, Navigators, everything all in one cool thematic book that you can just, if you just want to play Space Marines, cool, play Death Watch. But can you finally have proper armies that meld all this stuff together?
I mean, that we've always said that would be fucking cool, and they've definitely got the model range now. Like maybe in the past there wasn't quite enough, but now you can definitely pick up enough stuff to cobble together a cool ass Imperial Agents army. So yeah, let's hope so.
I can't wait to see if they actually bring all of these kits together with an option to. I mean, you can play 40k. You could bring 700. You could bring 1500 points of Grey Knights and 500 points of Inquisition now currently, which is better than it has been in the past. But a nice thematic book and some new models. Rumors that Kotiaz is going to be the poster boy because he popped up in the new rule book. So
that'd be cool.
Kotiaz
yeah,
reboot.
we spoke about that ages ago, didn't we?
Yeah. That'd be cool if they did him and a new version of old Big Trousers and all those guys.
Yeah,
That'd be
yeah.
fucking cool. Some of the guys from Inquisitor, that weird demon statue, all of them.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
a proper version of Cherub Bale to go with the Eisenhorn model they have out would be amazing. Yeah, fingers crossed that this is a proper release and they don't get done dirty like they have done in the past.
Yeah. I mean, this is obviously Fulgrim, right? I mean, you know, to
Yeah,
the
Fulgrim's in
layman,
there
this
too.
looks like Imperial Agents, but here on the LBP, we can see this is obviously teasing us for the Fulgrim release. So new
Tau.
codex is on the horizon. That's coming out soon. The Dragon Awakens. What we're going to see from these guys, we already know that Kroot's getting beefed up with some nice new models. But what's going on with the rules?
Yeah, we talked a lot about the Kroot. I think the weekend just before we recorded this, they went on sale, and I managed to really look deep inside myself and not buy the Kroot starter box. It was a very close thing because they're beautiful models. But they've started to preview some of the actual Tau unit rules, and it looks like the days of the cyclic ion blaster bomb are over. They've split the battle suits up into it's really snazzily named Tau things. The Fire Knife. It just sounds like a 3-year-old made up. Sounds like one of an LBP like unit generator.
Oh, it does, yeah.
Sunforge and Star Scythe. So depending on your loadout, I think loadout is just basically a little bit more refined and specific to battle suits in specific units, and therefore they have slightly different roles. So I think the Fire Knives are a bit like Eradicators. They drop in and blow shit up, and I don't really know, but it's nice to know that Games Workshop are fixing units that became kind of like destroyer units, but they still look pretty powerful, deep striking within 3 inches. And can move, shoot, move. So they're still going to be all over the place and up in your face.
As long as they haven't renamed their guns to like the Tickle Cannon and the Daisy Bender or whatever.
You must have seen the codex. He knows the new gun names.
No, I have. Yeah.
So yeah, it looks like it's going to be pretty good for Tau. What I'm interested is if you're a Tau player, comment somewhere on our video, wherever you're listening to it. Are you excited by the Kroot? Because I reckon people that are really into Tau probably aren't into Kroot, whereas we're really into Kroot because we're not really into Tau.
They're so different. It's all the greater good, but they didn't all give them the same uniforms.
Rolling in my 6-4.
Welcome, dear listener, to a story of the potential evil that lurks in every brilliant mind. The burden of genius corrupted by arrogance. He is known by many names. The Tarzan Rain Man, the Corpse Fiddler, and the Horny Professor, to name but a few. But you, dear listener, probably know him best as Dr. Welshie of the LBP. He conducts his experiments deep in the forgotten bowels of Castle Blastington, away from the judging eyes of God and the clammy grip of the law. Aided by his 2 vat-grown assistants, Frankenstonian Matt Gore, he works by candlelight to uncover the infernal workings of Space Marines, for reasons known only to himself. So prepare yourself, dear listener, as we join him now for a tale as twisted and poisonous as an orgy of serpents.
Bonesaw, please, Matt.
Bonesaw. Scalpel.
Oh shit, we've got a bleeder. Tourniquet, quick.
Tourniquet.
Oh, it's all in your face now.
Wet wipe. Wipe it down.
Ah, Master Welshie! A fresh corpse has just come in. I think you're going to want to see this one.
Put him on the slab, Igor. Put him on the slab.
So here he is, our mystery corpse. Let me unveil him here.
Very interesting indeed. Doesn't look like the body's giving much away. Looks to be elderly, white hair.
Is that a Slanesh tramp stamp?
Oh
Looks a
no.
bit Slanesh. It's certainly purple. No, it's not quite Slanesh. It says 3rd Legion. It's just above, you're right, just above the rectal cleft there, Stony. Wonder what that means.
Let me just have a rummage through his wallet for money and ID, and mostly money. Holy fuck, boys, it's only Fabius Bile!
Jesus!
Oh shit.
So, boys, if this is indeed Fabius Bile, I guess we need to think a bit about his backstory as to how he's ended up on our slab here today. So I've done a little bit of research on his rep sheet over the years, and then we can maybe get into some of the bits we've found on him, see if we can piece together the journey he's been on that leads him to our cold, hard slab. So it says here in his file that he was born on Terra to European nobility, possibly in the Bavarian region of Europe as we know it today. So, you know, mad scientists,
Bit Mengler-esque.
Oiskun Holt, I think it says. And he was known when he was a kid for nobility. What he used to do was talk to the flesh crafters that used to keep his parents youthful and get them to teach him how to flesh graft various rats he found around the house. And then he'd make the rats fight in his house. He'd like try and make super rats, but then he'd get really angry when they didn't listen to him and he'd kill them because he couldn't control the super rats he was flesh grafting, which is interesting choice for a child.
He was also very like well educated, wasn't he? He kind of like went to the sort of the Eton of like because he's always been a bit of a smart ass. And he kind of went to like all the sort of fancy schools and like did art and horse riding, I guess. I don't know what else to like they do in those places.
Okay. He definitely ticked all the boxes. Like, although his passion was clearly science and the biological sciences, he was definitely trained in Renaissance art and staring at himself in the mirror, I think, probably even at an early age. And I guess the fact he was so high in nobility made him an obvious choice when the Third Legion comes knocking, looking for new recruits. So he works his way up through the Legion pretty quickly. Those kind of early days of the Third Legion are interesting because Fulgrim isn't found for quite a while after the Third Legion is kind of being put together. And as a result, the Third Legion spends quite a lot of time initially around Horus, first found, other than Alfarius, if you believe Alfarius. So they kind of start forming their own structures really away from the presence of a Primarch. But one of the first things that happens that's quite interesting to the Third Legion, and partly why they become so fanatical about perfection, is they're decimated really early on by a virus called the Blight. And the Blight is actually engineered sabotage by the Selenar gene cults. So the Selenar gene cults of the moon that do all of the genetics stuff or help the Emperor achieve lots of the genetic stuff made a deal with Terra to kind of leave Luna, the moon, kind of as its own kind of vassal state. But he kind of reneges on that, steals their science. So they get really pissed off and try and sabotage what he's done. And the vast majority of the Third Legion, which will obviously go on to become the Emperor's children, die in this blight. And Fabius Bile is actually one of the only survivors, one of the only people that manages to survive this virus and goes on to start researching it and try and kind of stop it in its tracks. But it's really difficult. But they do kind of get their heads around it a bit. He manages to slow it a little bit.
Yeah. What was really intriguing about Fabius Bile to me is like, even from the very beginning, this striving for perfection with imperfection all around him. It's this strange kind of like he doesn't like the mice. He doesn't feel like he gets them quite right.
Yeah, I think like you say early on, you see those personality traits that come out later in the books. I think he's simultaneously very full of himself at the same time as realizing he hasn't achieved perfection yet. Like I think because he is so much better than most people. So compared to most people, he is better. But in his own eyes, he's not good enough, and nothing he ever does is quite where it needs to be. You're right, and that's before any kind of demonic effects or anything like that with the Legion.
Yeah.
So the only real answer to this blight is when they find Fulgrim. So eventually, Fulgrim gets found on Chemos. I'm sure we'll do a full Fulgrim episode at some point. But when Fabius Bile manages to get hold of Fulgrim's gene seed, he can work out the bits that he was missing to kind of come up with the proper cure for this blight. But he realizes that what they also need to do is test for the blight. So he comes up with a way of testing the legionaries for the blight, and all of the ones that test positive just get instantly culled. So it's actually like quite an early legion to take a massive hit where they're having to kill their own very early on in their kind of development. This is like early in the Great Crusade.
I'm no doctor, but that doesn't really sound like curing the blight. That sounds like killing people that have the blight.
No, it's not. And one of the things that's kind of, it's a bit of a loose end, is that it's sometimes implied that, it's definitely implied that he tested positive and then he switched his test out so that he didn't get killed and just got like one of his mates killed instead. So there's the kind of first hint that he's like pretty evil. His morals are definitely lacking. But I found it quite hard to find whether he's actually ever completely cured himself or whether he just keeps regenerating. This blight is essentially like cancer, it just forms tumors in your organs. So, yeah, as to whether he ever fully cured himself or whether he just stays on top of it or not isn't entirely clear. But either way, the fact that the Legion's decimated, even when Fulgrim arrives, means that they spend loads of time with the Lunar Wolves throughout the Great Crusade because they're just quite a small force and they need to be with a much larger force to accomplish anything. They're not trained like the Raven Guard or the Alpha Legion for, sneaky warfare. They want to be out showing their swordsman skills off on the battlefield. So that's partly how Fulgrim and Horus become close to start with, I think.
Don't they also become, because like they've got so many sickies in the Legion, don't they also become like really good apothecaries, and they kind of like act as like, they go around being apothecaries for like other legions and stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Like they because I think, like you say, they had to treat their own illness for so long that I think there are others involved. But very swiftly, Fabius Bile becomes, by the end of the Great Crusade, prior to the Horus Heresy, he becomes the chief apothecary, like quite quick rising up the ranks. So he is literally top apothecary in the Emperor's Children, so very high up in the chain of command.
WebMD of the 40K universe.
Exactly. So, like rising star, you'd think, okay, he had a bit of a twisted interest in rats when he was a kid, but he's worked hard. He's kind of helped the Legion out. He's a good guy. He's at the top. He's organizing medics across the battlefield. But
that's the weird
other
thing.
Than the
is
fact
like,
he switched out his test.
I mean, we're
definitely
going to get into this later, I'm sure. But like, he definitely sees himself as a good guy. Like, he definitely thinks his own, like, that he's doing this all for, like, he wants to help people, and that the way he's helping, the way that what he's doing is helping people.
In the long run, I think he thinks he's helping humanity by making them better. He's a eugenicist, essentially.
That's
the nod towards like
Nazis.
The Bavarian stuff and the Nazi, like it is background. But
that's an interesting point about the Legion, though, because I'm trying to think of another, certainly before the Horus Heresy, another Legion where there is like a famous quote unquote apothecary.
Like, there aren't many,
Yeah, it's an interesting point as to why a senior officer in a legion is a doctor. Like the other legions have their main officers are like military commanders, not the doctors. But
he is offered quite often to like say take charge of it, and he's like, no, he doesn't want. He wants to carry on doing this. It's kind of. It's not because he doesn't, it's because he chooses to do it, not because he's being forced to. I think that's quite interesting as well. That most Space Marines just want to rise straight up the command chain, whereas he's quite happy being where he is.
He even, and again, this is a bit later on, ends up kind of mocking sort of like normal Space Marines as being kind of like big, muscled up, brutish arseholes, and really they should be like clever apothecaries, kind of more like him, like, kind of warrior monk type bullshit.
Exactly, with sweet coats, which we'll get onto as well.
Oh, yeah.
But while he's kind of rising up this, unbeknownst to other people in the Legion, and this happens for the first time, I think, written in the Battle of Murder, which is an amazing battle early in the Horus Heresy book series, part of the Great Crusade, where they're fighting giant spiders. So the Blood Angels are there, the Lunar Wolves are there, the Emperor's Children are there. They're fighting giant spiders, and secretly Fabius Bile is dragging Blood Angel corpses and Blood Angels that are near death and Emperor's Children corpses that are near death to his secret laboratory that's hidden away, and is already doing experiments that he probably shouldn't be doing without Fulgrim knowing about it at this stage. Testing out lotions, potions. Can he push the warriors to become stronger? Can he stop them from feeling pain? Like full experimental Frankenstein stuff.
Yeah. I mean, like most of these kind of 40K geniuses, he's like super duper arrogant. Like, oh, that's going to come through again and again. But like, he really does. But it's all about the kind of the science, isn't it? It's like, that's almost like we've talked about sometimes how in Mechanicum and stuff like that, science is kind of the god. Where it's almost like more than that for him. It's like, it's it's the truth, you know, for him is the science, and everything that he does, even if it is this kind of twisted stuff, is in effort of the truth rather than any kind of moral standing, really. And he's always like that's he goes above Fulgrim and everybody. He's like, "But this research must be done," sort of thing.
Yeah,
It's like a full-on one-track mind and sod anyone else.
Yeah,
which again is if you think timeline and what's happening, there are very few other characters that are going against, or not necessarily against at this point, but ignoring the will of their primarchs this early on in the story. Even Typhus isn't really thinking about it at this point, you know.
But even beyond Fulgrim, like he thinks he can be better than the Emperor, you know. He's aiming for the stars. Even like, you know, Fulgrim's just a kind of a guy he works with, you know.
But the truth thing is something that he'll stick to. We'll see come up throughout his whole story as we go on. Like you say, I think it's easy to forget when you look back to the Great Crusade from a 40K perspective that this was a time of science. It was literally illegal to be religious. Like religion wasn't allowed. Science was the only thing. So in his mind, he's probably following the most important thing for society, not just his own opinion. It's, you know, if the Emperor is saying the only thing that's important is the imperial truth, ghosts aren't real, he probably thinks he's doing the right thing by trying to expose that in its full.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
But then they start to come across some weirder Xenos, which I think, Stoney, you might tell us about.
Well, Welshie, I think that you're referring to Exhibit A, the snakeskin underwear on this corpse. Probably made from some of the lair, the snake men of some planet. The Fulgrim and the Emperor's children, and I think also like was the Death Guard there? No, maybe it was just the Emperor's children. Forget that. But the Emperor's children come down and bust up, and they turn out to be some kind of like Slanesh worshipping snake bastards with a bunch of noise weapons and a cool sword that sends Fulgrim a bit loopy.
Sorry, this is when Bile really starts to realize what could possibly be achieved by mutating and fiddling with Space Marines and giving them extra organs and really trying to push their gene seed forward, because they're fighting this reptilian race. And I think up until that point, they probably hadn't seen many non-humanoid Xenos other than like giant spiders. But he's just come across a race of like reptile people and gone, holy crap, these reptile people have got loads of organs that people don't have. What if I give people reptile organs? That would be fun. And I think it really changes.
It starts, isn't it? Yeah, that's right.
It is.
Yeah,
it changes his view on people.
Because have they not also got some of this kind of like, because he eventually ends up installing some shouty things in some guy's throat. Yeah, he gets in some of the in some of his Space Marines. Do they not come from the lair?
Yeah, so those organoids, I think he finds in them because they have, like you say, these weird noise weaponry, and he works out how to install that within Space Marines. And it's how the prototype type noise marines called the cacophony, those kind of original ones, utilize these glands that he's putting in. So he's already thinking to himself, not only am I doing great fun science that I really enjoy, but I'm improving the work of the Emperor. Normal Space Marines can't scream really loudly and make people shit their pants.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I'm already better than the Emperor.
So, and moving towards perfection as well, which is also his kind of goal.
This is the bit that always confused me, because this is in the Fulgrim book, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
So it's like a very early book in the Horus Heresy book series. It's like book 6 or something.
Book 4, I think.
All right, but a favorite of ours that we've mentioned many times. I remember I always found it very confusing listening to this book, where I just couldn't get my head around how he descends into this thought process of thinking that is perfection, like putting this Xenos weird throat thing into Space Marines and experimenting with human psychic physical bodies. Like it just didn't make sense to me. And I'm quite interested in his sort of, it is interesting, his thought process as he descends into...
I think for him, because he's, like we say, he's detached, he's like You know,
Yeah.
if you if you remove yourself from the idea of factions and stuff in 40K, is what he's doing any worse than making a space marine? Do you know what I mean? It's just this kind of, and that's kind of his sort of
I think this early bit here is less about like I'm aiming to create the perfect human. I don't think he's got to that point. I think this is just trial and error. I think this is him going, can I do it? Can I put that bit of snake person in a space marine and make it do stuff?
Yeah, definitely. It's more just experimentation than
And when it starts paying off, and then he starts getting some feedback, you know, and Fulgrim obviously notices this happen. People going around be shouting real loud in snake language.
Someone like clears their throat and like blasts a hole in the TV or something.
Exactly. And he's really important. Him and Eidolon and Lucius are all involved in kind of they have to revive Fulgrim from this demonic presence that's come from the Lair Sword through like hideous torture stuff, like really horrible stuff to try and like exercise the complete control this demon has, and Fulgrim just goes kind of completely off the rails. But at the same time as like helping out his commander, he's adding more and more bits of stuff to Space Marines who are beginning to lose their mind because they don't know what to do about it. And then the kind of outcome of that is that wonderful scene in Fulgrim where the cacophony come out and are playing on a stage made out of like people's skin that's still attached to the people screaming in the bottom of the stage.
Yeah.
Whilst like a woman paints a portrait of Fulgrim out of human shit, like on the wall. Like that's what this descends to. But that whole time, he's like not interested in the fact that there's weird whispers in the walls. He's just like, oh, can I put another bit of something in someone? Like the magic isn't he's not even noticing it. It's like, oh, another successful like
but I mean
snake testicle.
But that's another thing about this kind of idea of striving for perfection is it's kind of like the idea is when you get to perfection, the whole journey of how you got there won't matter at all because everything will be fucking great. Everyone will be fantastic, and it wouldn't matter. You know, it's this kind of idea of perfection above all else again, isn't it? So in a way, it is a fucking amazing scene, but it is kind of like he's so unconcerned with everything apart from just putting things on stuff and grafting frogs' legs to dudes or whatever, and like fucking getting out there.
I remember like at that point just feeling it's very clear in the book, isn't it, that by this point he is his own man. Yeah. It's like there's the Emperor's children on one side and then there's Fabius Bile on the other. Like he's already left the building.
Yeah.
He's just doing whatever the fuck he wants. He's just wearing the purple armor.
Yeah. So this is like before. I mean, I don't know whether that scene we just mentioned falls before Istvan or after in the exact timeline, but Istvan happens. Ferrus Manus gets his head cut off. Fulgrim's beginning to lose his way, and he's now in on the Horus heresy. Horus has told him what his plans are. So Fulgrim is like absolutely devastated that he didn't manage. He's got enough of himself left. He can't understand how he couldn't manage to convince Ferrus Manus to join him and Horus. So he goes to Bile and gets Bile to clone Ferrus Manus so that he can have another go at convincing Ferrus Manus to join him and Horus. And Ferrus still says no. So he decapitates him and then goes back to Bile and gets him to clone another one, like over and over again.
Yeah.
So quite early on, like Bile is capable of literally cloning Primarchs. And is just being wasted on the arrogance of Fulgrim not being able to understand why his best friend didn't want to join him on the heretical side. So he's still kind of doing a bit what he's told there, probably doing it because he wants to see if he can, but he is doing the wishes of Fulgrim.
Because I think that he does. I think he does use slightly different recipes each time, doesn't he? Like he does start fucking around with it after he's done the same. He's produced his 16th Ferrus Manus, and for Fulgrim to chop the head off, he's like, oh, maybe I'll just add in a little bit of Lehman Russ or something else. He's like he's like dunking, maybe not other Primarchs, but he's definitely. I remember that he does make other versions of them because does he not? He makes he even makes one designed to be kind of particularly placid. And even he ends up being like, no, I wouldn't fall to chaos. You're fucking mental.
Yeah, for sure. I think I think later on he starts getting access to other gene seeds and inserting those. I think at this stage it's just a case of like fiddling with the genes that he's got, like you
Sure.
say, to make them
Just
have
put in a bit of
different
Ajax,
personalities,
fairy
just to
liquid,
learn.
anything lying around. Yeah.
Exactly. So then he's kind of like bumbles around. He's carrying on with his experiments. He's kidnapping bodies for various legionaries, trying to get as much gene code from the different legionaries that he can like drag off of the battlefield. It all kind of culminates towards the Siege of Terror. The Emperor's Children are they're not really there for the main bits of the Siege of Terror. There's a wonderful fight scene between Fulgrim and Dawn, like on the wall with like a small group. But the vast majority of the Emperor's Children are just literally let loose, just ransack Terror. And what Fabius Bile uses this as the opportunity to do is he takes a squad of his like top acolytes that he's already been fiddling with to the administratum buildings and the administratum part of the city and literally just slaughters tens to hundreds of thousands of administratum workers and renders them down to drugs so that he can try giving these drugs to the Emperor's Children to see if it like boosts them up. He like renders the administratum personnel into uppers, essentially. That's what he's doing on the Siege of Terror.
Oh, mate. Yeah. Oh, dear.
It's such a quick
Ritalin,
downfall.
cocaine. I don't like. Yeah.
Well, I've called it on our little body bit here that we forgot to mention, but I was going with administraticum.
It's a straticum, yeah.
Yeah.
Shooting ropes of ministraticum into his mates.
But again, he's just using the opportunity to experiment and try like random stuff. He clearly has no respect or concern for morals or people's well-being or anything like that. It's just how can I utilize this situation to get better at science and find out more stuff and make better versions of Space Marines? And that's the point. While he's doing all of this, he realizes that Horus is going to lose and he literally just fucks off. He takes his acolytes, he takes his administraticum after being the cause of like essentially genocide and just goes, nah, mate, see you later. I'm not really into this. I'm going it alone. And Fulgrim puts a bounty on his head at that point and he just leaves Terra and heads off out into the stars, which I think is probably a good point for us to have a look at some of the other armor and bits of pieces we've found on him, see how he can manage his future adventures.
Let's have a little rummage through these items here that came alongside the body. And I think, first of all, we should probably have a little talk about this massive thing that was strapped to his back, this huge many-armed backpack thing that seemed to have been grafted onto his spine. This is
creepy looking.
It's pretty creepy. They don't call him the spider for nothing. It's because of these legs that are here, I'm guessing. But this is his artificer armor, which is possessed by a demon called the
Chirurgeon.
Chirurgeon.
It's like where surgeon comes from, I think.
Oh, right. Okay. Chirurgeon.
Yeah.
And this basically lives in his back-mounted tools, and it basically kind of keeps him alive into old age. And he can use the arms on it more or less like they were just an extension of his body. It gives him crazy strength if he needs it, or other kind of abilities by pumping all kinds of drugs and ichor through his veins. Basically just keeping him alive. So that's pretty this looks pretty fucking sick. I've even heard that he could use it to inject other random people that are around him. Like he might just be in the middle of the battle being like, oh shit, this guy looks like he's doing well. Maybe I'll shoot some of this untested chemical into him. And he just jabs him with one of his syringes on a stick and sees what happens. Sometimes it makes them real strong and good. Sometimes they shit their
Sometimes they
pants
get a
and
tiny
die.
arm. Sometimes they get a giant arm.
Yeah, they get one giant Popeye arm and one shriveled arm or something random like that.
I think I read one of the like vials on the surgeon like contains demon ichor that he uses as like a kind of anti-venom as well, like if there's demons around that he's managed to make.
Yeah, he's got this weird kind of relationship with demon stuff where he kind of doesn't like it because it's not scientific enough, but then he also he enjoys what it does, but he doesn't he calls them like blunt instruments. It's the same with another piece of war gear we're going to talk about in a second. It just pumps different. It sort of senses what he needs and pumps him full of it. Basically, it's kind of just he thinks that he's completely in control of it, but it definitely does seem to have a bit of a life of its own. He can operate on himself with it as well, which is kind of cool. So he can just be like, hey, you know what? Oh, I need my appendix out, and just gets in there with his spider arms or whatever.
Yeah, it's such a cool, like, it's a cool piece of kit. It's very grim dark, and his model has always stood out on the board from the old lead one.
Yeah, I was going to say the old model. Yeah,
revamp. You can see him a mile off. That silhouette is so creepy, and it's so obvious what it's there to do.
Yeah,
I remember back in the day, 20 years ago, that model. You flick through the catalogue, all the stupid Chaos Terminators and funky old-fashioned models, but this one really stood out, and it was just the presence of the model was just dark.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
It needed no further description.
No. I mean, it does. It tells you everything you kind of need to know about him, and of course, he sets it all off with the ultimate drip, the skin cape. All stitched together bits of skin, which he kind of like. He never really explains, other than the fact that he kind of likes it. There's no real like. People. There have definitely been times where people sort of question him on the fact that he's wearing this, and he does seem to kind of just breeze over it. He's like, it looks cool on a model. Leave me alone. Essentially.
It's like, butchers, they wear leather capes. And they're like, but they're like normally cows. And is that a cow? He's like,
It's like, surely you'd want to make some kind of like scientific one with like a bulletproof weave in or something. He's like, no, human skins,
straight up human skin.
Yeah. So he's got that's the
Chirurgeon.
But it doesn't end there, because his other kind of demon weapon thing is the Rod of Torment, and this used to belong to a demon prince called
Shalak-Glak,
the Marquis of Mutilation. It's never really explained how he picked this up, which that's got to be a story in there, because I've never heard. I couldn't find anywhere how he managed to get it. But basically, this is a demon weapon, which anyone that touches it it's just overwhelming pain. You're sort of folded up in pain. It's the worst kind of pain you've experienced. But he kind of has this love-hate relationship with him, where it's like he hates the fact it's a demon weapon, but he says that it makes him smile every time he uses it, and he ends up kind of using it almost kind of like one of those old strict Victorian school teachers, where he'd like kind of, if his subordinates are around, he'll just like be like, oh, this sandwich is cold or whatever, and jab them with the fucking pain stick until they like.
Yeah, you can imagine him just like walking down the street, minding his own business, just letting it brush lightly on anyone walking by, just for a little giggle,
I think
rise
he'd love
to
that.
himself.
I think he'd love that. Definitely. Anyone, if you turn away for a second whilst your dog has a piss on his car tire, boom, he's going to get it with the stick. Anything like that. Anybody around.
It always makes me think of whenever I see him with it, like walking forward with it, like that. The Ian Dury song, "Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick." Whenever I see Fabius Bile, I just start singing that in my head, and I imagine him striding down the street with his Rod of Torment.
That's definitely what he's thinking in his head, is hit me with your rhythm stick, as he's just like, giving these people the worst pain that they've ever experienced. He's also got his Zyklos Needler, which is basically a gun that shoots syringes, essentially, and he loads them up with all kinds of chemicals. I think he must have particular brews for different things, but just sort of untested chemicals. Some of them have been known to burn people, be kind of corrosive. Some of them have known to have kind of like mind-altering sort of hallucinogenic effects. And some of them have even known to make people explode. So they've had all sorts of mixed effects, but most of the time it's just kind of random untested chemicals that he's found around. He loads them into these syringes and blasts them out there.
It must be like proper distracting trying to fight next to him. Like you go up to a group and, everyone else is firing their bolt pistols, and then suddenly one of the people you're looking at dissolves into like a green goo, and you're like, what the hell's going on? Or
just weird, unexplained.
Just gives you a wig, like, just a new formula.
Just weird, unexplainable chemical reactions happening, and him just like his little gimps running up and scooping things up in a pan or whatever, and you're like, that used to be Gary, what's happened?
There's an ultramarine running around being like, looking at the sky and shouting about bats. What's going on?
Yeah.
Oh, guys, look. Maybe this key does something. There's got a little button on it.
That is his spacecraft, the Velicius. Have you seen this?
Can't miss it.
talk about the elephant in the room, you know. This is a modified Galactus class frigate that he nicked off the Imperium at some stage. And it's been modified with a bunch of Xenos tech and other heretical things, meaning that the machine spirit inside it is all basically an abominable intelligence. And it's kind of like a, what's it, 1001 Space Odyssey style, hello,
How?
Dave, you know, type
Yeah.
dude. Yeah. It's
HAL
one of those.
9000.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the ship called now?
It's called the Vesalius.
Cool.
It's crewed by a bunch of mutants and gland hounds and a bunch of other weird shit that he's cobbled together. All kinds of weird Empress children that he's worked on, genetically modified by him, all to sort of best serve their purpose on the ship. In the lower decks roam these weird flesh-crafted beasts that he's just kind of like have escaped his weird test labs and stuff and hunt people when they go down there. They're like, oh, go change the barrel. We need another air freshener on the wing mirror over here. Go down into the stockroom and get one, and you might well just be eaten by some strange mutant beast.
Yeah.
Also, at the center of this vessel is a garden comprised of wraith bone, which Bile has been secretly cultivating. And this living wraith bone has been grown onto the very structure of the vessel. At the center of this wraith bone is a horrifically mutated, demonologically corrupted eldar male known as Key, who was once member of the Sunblitz Brotherhood until he was captured by Bile. And now he uses Key to access the Rebway when he's needed.
Great. So he's got like a trapped Webway pilot just fused into the middle of his ship.
Basically, so he can use the Webway. He's just like, hey, yeah, I've just tortured this man enough. It seems to be that all his science is basically torturing people. So it's just like, oh, yeah, I've just tortured this guy enough to be able to use the Webway and a bunch of other type things like that. So that is pretty fucking cool. But he's got a bit of history with the Eldar.
I also know, Stoney, that on his big frigate, he's got a gunship, hasn't he, called the Butcher Bird. I don't know if you read about that. So he's got like a smaller craft that he flies.
That name is great.
Yeah.
And I've just literally looked up what a butcher bird is because I thought it must be from something. Do you guys know about these birds in real life?
Yeah, it's a real bird, isn't it?
Yeah, but they're like magpies, and what they do is they catch their prey apparently, and they spike it onto a branch of a tree whilst it's still alive, and then fly by it and like peck the meat off it as it's hanging from the tree. So it's a pretty apt ship name for Fabius Bile. The Butcher Bird gunship that he's got inside.
His features would never be normal again.
Welcome back, everybody, to this part of the show, the random topic generator, where we get our hermetically sealed dice from their argon-sealed container. Welshie has
It's
here.
a 4. We've rolled a 4, guys. And this week, the 4 is, in light of our... well, not in light of our episode, because it's completely by random, but if you were Fabius Bile and you could mix 2 Primarch's gene seeds together to create a super Primarch, which 2 and why? I mean, I'm going to go purely on aesthetics, I think.
Yeah.
And not worry too much about personality.
Yeah. I think I'm going to agree, which is why I think I'm going to pick Magnus the Red and Sanguinius to try to make the ultimate hair dude Primarch, the best hair in all of 40K, the biggest, the most voluptuous with Magnus, and the maybe silkiest and probably maybe potentially best smelling hair from.
He'd be quite aloof as a person, I reckon.
I think that I want him to have more or less blank features. I'm going to clone out all the rest of his features. He's just hair. He is, and this is the second time I've mentioned Vidal Sassoon for some reason, but this is going to be the Vidal Sassoon Primarch.
Does he have 3 eyes? Do you reckon? Or 2?
You can't. You don't even know. That's the thing, is you don't know what any of his features are because you're so blinded by his hair. The only thing you can describe is his hair. This is what makes him the ultimate Primarch. He's even better than Alfarius at sneaking around because he puts a hat on. No one knows who he is. But the minute he whips that hat off, everyone's like, "Oh my god, is that fucking Vidal Sassoon, the greatest Primarch of all time?"
Like a Tony Hawk's character when you've only picked hair and the rest is like a morph character.
Yeah, basically. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
That's good.
Well, I think I'll go animal in that respect then. And I'll go, my Primarch of choice, Korax, but I'm going to mix him with Russ. So we're going to have like a half wolf, half raven kind of character who's still got his gothic side, but like doesn't mind a couple of weekends away in Marbella drinking up with the lads. He's mostly into like Cradle of Filth, but every now and then he'll go out with the lads, have a bit of Ailstorm.
Yeah, that's true. But he's still not going to be very good at getting tanned. Like, you know, like he's still not going to be great in Marbella because let's face it, both Russ is from the snow planet and he's going to be an icy goth. He might be even more mega goth, to be fair.
Russ is quite
You've made Glenn Danzig. You've made Danzig.
Running like a sex club where you have to be dressed in like a sex club for furries. But it's all like Berlin techno lighting, but
they've all got like the middle bit cut out, so they have to have a 6-pack to get in, or like
Yeah, that works. But maybe Russ is like, well, I suppose he's quite ginger, but you get those like Swedes that tan really well.
Oh yeah,
like
they all
blonde
do.
Swedes that tan
They all
really
do.
well.
Yeah, because of the
but not gingers
sun.
though. Gingers
but you're mixing
still,
it with a goof, you know, a goth, a goofy goth.
True.
He's who's very pasty. He even hates the light.
That's true. They'd have some cool like warp-esque powers, maybe like a shadow wolf would be pretty sweet, wouldn't it?
I've always I've said in maybe a long time ago, I always thought that the space wolves would be kind of cooler if they were space ravens and they had like feathers and stuff like that, and like, you know,
like that Warcry warband.
Yeah, I think that would be cool. But yeah, alas. Well, this guy, that's it. Maybe Glenn Danzig could be head of the Space Ravens, you know, where it's all kind of like Space Wolf aesthetic, like they're shamans and stuff, but they've got like a big crow's skull on their head and everything. You've done some of that with your army.
Yeah, I have. Yeah. I've got my chaplain's literally got a crow's head. You're right.
Yeah.
Bill Skarsgård's
cool.
the new crow, isn't he?
Yeah.
Matt, who are you going for?
Well, I've been trying to think of who I'd mix with Angron to make an even angrier Primarch.
Kurz is always pretty angry.
Oh, that's true.
Like a massive whiny beast man.
No, that's I'd mix Angron and Kurz. That's just like the stuff of nightmares.
Yeah, he sounds terrible. but Kurz is really sneaky. You'd just be like getting about your day-to-day business. Be like, oh, that's a suspicious-looking shadow in the corner. You just hear it like muttering to itself, like "fuck you." You're like, that shadow seems really angry.
Yeah. Oh, there I was thinking, Matt, you were going to go with Gilliman and Dawn for the most Roman of all of the primates.
Yeah. I was also trying to think of who to mix with Vulcan.
Imagine
for his,
Vulcan and Angron. He like aggressively tries to save people. Or like...
Gotta be Vulcan.
Yeah.
Get in the fucking car, we're going. Oh dear listener, turn back now. Turn back lest it already be too late. For as the dark Dr. Welshie operated deep into the inky night, he uncovered secrets too diabolical for any man to know. The type of secrets that have the power to change a fella, to fracture one's sanity. So turn back, listener, and save yourself. Or perhaps you too suffer under some small arrogance. Well, very well. If you believe you're up to it, then know this. Things are gonna get even creepier now as Dr. Welshie discovers a small bound book in the leather of human flesh, containing horrors yet unknown.
So, boys, it seems from this little book then, it's kind of outlining where he went after he left Terra. It looks like he was hunted immediately. Like we say, Fulgrim had put a price on his head, so the Emperor's children were potentially after him. But the people that managed to find him first in the scouring after the Siege of Terra were the Salamanders. And they found him living on a planet, trading his kind of genetic knowledge for fetuses. That's where the Salamanders find him a little bit further down the line. He has flesh refineries and cloning vats, and he's buying like fetuses from the person in charge of the planet, so he can render them down into fetal serums. The salamanders obviously don't like this because they're quite friendly with population. In fact, they're the most friendly local populations.
Melting down babies, eh?
Yeah,
no,
that's not how we do forges.
I don't remember seeing that in the Codex Astartes.
Yeah.
So they burn the planet looking for him, and Fabius Bile does what will become a recurring theme, sneaks out the back door and somehow manages to escape, where he then moves to a crone world, which is a dead eldar world. So sometimes they're kind of full of dark eldar, sometimes they've been infested with demons, sometimes they're just like full of disabled eldar. It's kind of
an abandoned eldar world, essentially.
Yeah, basically like a ghost town for the eldar.
Yeah, like a boarded up karate studio.
Exactly. And he starts doing some experiments, and he gathers up some emperor's children on this demon world, and goes to a world called Harmony, gathers up some emperor's children, and goes on a mission to find Horus's body, which is on a planet called Malian, because he's kind of decided that if he can do a clone of Ferrus Manus and he can do a clone of Fulgrim, because he's been pissing around with that as well in the past, he might as well try and do it with Horus. Horus is top bod. So he finds Horus's body, manages to clone him and some of the other Primarchs in this secret lab. And do you know who comes and puts an end to that? Because he's really, really pissed that Horus has been revived.
Abaddon the Despoiler.
Certainly is.
Yeah.
So, he hates the fact his daddy's been cloned.
He stamps on his homework and says, no, no, no.
Yeah, exactly. And
gives that dweeb a wedgie.
Bile basically goes, "You've wasted so much of my time," and then runs away. He's really pissed off that Abaddon's come and spoiled all of his work, even though it sounds like it was a little bit dodgy.
Yeah. But Abaddon also kind of forgives him at that stage as well. There's this kind of weird, they have this weird kind of like pact made between them. He does run off, but it's not like, I've kind of made it sound like Abaddon's stalking the halls of his ship trying to give this dweeb a wedgie, but actually it's more like they have a bit of a sit down and a chat about it and sort of decide to kind of let each other sort of...
I reckon like Fabius has probably got some respect for Abaddon as literally the only other traitorous legionary that hasn't completely fallen to chaos, has some power over like what they're doing. I mean, I know there's traitors that turn good, but these are two old boys that are managing to hold off what essentially no one else could. So maybe there's a bit of mutual respect there, but he certainly doesn't like the fact that he's trying to bring Horus back. So Bile gets away and he moves to another crone world called Urim. And at this point, he's being chased by like literally everybody. The Eldar are after him. The Emperor's children are after him. Some of Abaddon's people are still after him. He is public enemy number one at this
It's
point.
like one of those Benny Hill sketches where he's down a corridor with a bunch of doors on, like Scooby-Doo, he's running through one, someone's chasing him out,
Exactly like that. And when he gets to Urim, he thinks he might try and settle down a bit and take a bit of control. So he forms what he calls the Consortium, which made me think of that Peep Show bit where it's like consortium.
Yeah. His new consultancy company,
exactly.
flesh binding.
So he gathers up all these apothecaries and just starts coming up with like experiments and plans. And they basically sounds like on this planet Urim, they kind of sit in their labs looking out at the windows, watching their creations kind of run rampant. Like, I don't know, like they're playing Conkers or something, like seeing whose creations wins. Let's put them underwater and see whose ones fight the best and stuff.
Yeah.
It seems like a laugh if you're Fabius Bile. I reckon he probably quite enjoys that because he's always the best, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets cocky enough from doing that to decide that he is getting on a bit. He might still have a bit of this blight cancer going on. And what he needs to do is become immortal. So at this point, he decides to take the Consortium and go and attack an entire Eldar craft world because he thinks they might have this bit of science that he might want to get his hand on. So he goes tries to destroy this craft world, but the whole thing turns out to be a setup by one of his old mates called Ko and some Harlequins. And this storyline, I think, is all in the Josh Reynolds Fabius Bile trilogy, which is really cool. Promogenitor, Clone Lord, and Manflayer. And what they're trying to do is trick him into leading all of the Emperor's children because they want an actual leader back. So these are the kind of Emperor's children that have a bit of sense, that haven't like completely taken all the drugs and started fucking demonettes, and are like, can we actually have a leader? Maybe we can kind of get some power back in the galaxy. I'm not quite sure why the Harlequins are involved. Like, they seem to like messing people around and kicking off all these kind of Greek tragedies in space. But the whole thing's a bit of a setup, and Bile doesn't manage to actually get the magical elixir that keeps him alive forever. So he realizes he needs a job at this point, and he goes and finds his old mate Eidolon, who previously in the Horus Heresy he is installed with the first cacophony voice screamer, and then reattached his head. When Eidolon gets beheaded, Fabius Bile sews his head back on, and his voice changes completely in the Horus Heresy, where he starts like slurring all his words and becoming this grotesque thing. So anyway, he goes to see Eidolon, and Eidolon employs him, says to him, I know where there's some fresh, 100% unfiltered, pure Emperor's Children gene seed that you can get your hands on. Will you go and get it for me? Fabius Bile says, obviously, yes. And Eidolon says, great, I'll send like an army with you. Why he trusts him, I've got absolutely no idea. So Eidolon sends a whole army with Bile to go and get this fresh gene seed. And it is on Solemnus, which is a planet with a friend of the show, metal shiny friend of the show.
Traz in the Infinite.
Traz in the Infinite. So it turns out that this gene seed is actually in the hands of Traz in the Infinite. So he gets there and manages to sit down like two old dudes. He has a chat with Traz in the Infinite, and he goes, I tell you what, mate, what I've got for you, I found recently, forgot I had it in one of my old labs. I can give you a child clone of Fulgrim and this entire army that Eidolon has sent to me in exchange for that gene seed. Makes that deal, gets the gene seed, fucks off, doesn't go back to Eidolon's, traded his army and a Fulgrim clone. Brilliant. Which is how that thing that we've come up against loads when we say like Trazin's got all of this cool stuff locked away.
Yeah.
That's how he gets the Fulgrim clone.
Does Trazin not also have a clone of Fabius Bile? Because Fabius Bile makes a couple of clones of himself as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, so it does turn out a bit later on that one of the stories, Fabius Bile gets killed, and it turns out it's not Fabius Bile, and there's loads of Fabius Biles running around all over the place. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. That's probably why Trazin didn't want him. Trazin's quiz in, and he's like, I've already got one of you.
I think I read that he's got himself a Fabius, as part of his collection. He's doing all right in there.
Yeah. So anyway, this gene seed is enough apparently for 18,000 pure legionaries. At this point now, Fabius Bile's basically got an army. He can just make a full legion. But that's not enough for him. So this is where he goes and decides he'll have a bit of a holiday. He's done well, and his vacation place of choice is Camorra, the Dark Eldar.
Yeah, why not?
Of Camorra. Yeah. He loves it. We've been
good
there on
holiday location.
Yeah, it's great.
Check out our Camorra episode. And the way he gets into Camorra, I guess he uses his webway gimp to help him get there. But when he gets there, he just surrenders because he's so confident he knows more about brutal torture than the Dark Eldar do, that he just literally goes, puts his hands up and's like, yeah, but I bet you guys really love ripping skin off people's balls. And they're like, actually, we do. Do you want to be best mate?
Get in here, you scamp. Yeah.
Gives him a little nuggie.
It is a bit like that, though, isn't it? Like he ends up kind of like apprenticing with them. They really like his style, and he ends up building them this thing called the Tower of Flesh.
Yeah, that's where he's working, yeah.
Which is a massive building basically made out of skinned people that are still somehow alive, and therefore, like, the walls are much like the stage in the Fulgrim book is all just made up of like faces going like, oh God, why?
That's probably what he says. It's probably the Dark Eldar come to him with some blueprints. They're like, this is what we're going for, whole tower.
Yeah.
And Fabius Bile's like, I've seen something like that before, actually, a stage
You know,
a while ago. I can help you with that.
when we hear all this stuff, we think like, oh God, this is disgusting or whatever. But if you were like a Dark Elder, you'd see him as like a Lawrence Llewellyn Bowen type, where you're like, oh, I know, I'm never gonna be able to get my room the way I like it. And he's like,
Yeah.
well, do you need skin drapes? Boop, you know, fucking like, get in there and like sort it all out. So they fucking love that because he basically helps them out with a bunch of stuff. But the homunculus and him are kind of really too similar. You know, they end up kind of falling out.
They do. And once he's kind of learned what he wants to learn and gets a bit bored, he realizes he needs to get out of there. So he literally starts a war between two cabals as a distraction and then gets off. I think the two cabals are part of the coven of the 13 Scars or something, which is who are now also chasing them. So he runs away because he's got loads of their secrets and they start chasing him too. So every faction is now after Fabius Bile, but he just keeps learning more and more and more and getting cleverer and cleverer.
That's arrogance, isn't it? Going to the Dark Angels, going to the Dark Eldar's homeworld and saying that I'm better than you.
Yeah.
Here, take me, and I'll prove it to you.
Yeah.
And he sort of does in a way.
Well, this is kind of what we were saying before as well, with like, thinks he's better than everybody. He's got no fear of anyone. Like he goes behind Fulgrim's back really early on. He doesn't care. He's just got his own agenda. Even with the Chaos Gods, he doesn't see himself as like falling to the Chaos Gods or anything at this stage when his friends obviously have and stuff.
That's a good question. I mean, I don't see him as fallen.
No,
actually, either. I mean, I think that's why he's quite an interesting character because he is, to me, he's just evil.
Yeah.
He's just an evil human being, and he doesn't need the Chaos influence to be one of the most evil
he's just
characters
being himself.
in the lore.
But then it's also kind of one of those things where at the same time their goals are aligned, so it doesn't really matter if he's fallen to the Chaos Gods or not, because some people need to be tricked into following Chaos and some people are just kind of already there. And in a way, he's kind of one of those people that are already there, a bit like a Erebus type character, maybe.
Yeah, I think in that way. But I think in like he definitely still has this twisted version of the Imperial truth where he believes that science will triumph over chaos, and it just doesn't matter to him how he gets there. He thinks he can become Emperor of the Galaxy by being the best at science.
Well, it's so tainted by his own view of himself, where it's like we talk about, I don't want to get into like a whole Stoney's esoteric bullshit section, but like when we talk about like Slaanesh and stuff, and they've got this kind of satanic imagery, as in like Levian Satanism rather than like devil worship or something. It's about the worship of yourself. We talk about do as thou wilt is the whole of the law, these kind of things, and he's very much a part of that. It's this idea of becoming a god yourself, which is kind of what he's about. But like in a way, because it starts off as this science, but it always ends up with really it means that I'm right and I must do the things that I think are right. Because I mean, I'm sure that later on we're going to talk about the fact that he meets with Cool, who is someone who maybe has a similar view, this kind of the ends justify the means type thing in a way. But they disagree completely on almost everything. So it does become this like, what I'm looking for the truth, but the truth is always me and my intelligence, and
definitely.
I was thinking about him earlier, and in a way, to me, he's almost like a dark emperor.
Yeah, well, that's certainly what he wants to become, and he thinks of himself as a good person, like the Emperor. He thinks of himself as someone that's bringing mankind back together and things. That because he talks about that with Cool.
Yeah, definitely. I think. Well, we can move on to that, I guess, soonish. There's way too much to go into what he does. I mean, he is probably maybe even the single most fleshed out character in all of 40K lore, apart from someone like Gaunt, who has his own series. He has an entire trilogy to himself. He had 2 other books pretty much entirely to himself. He's the bad guy in multiple other trilogies. Other bits that he does is he fucks around the Dark Angels, steals the sanguinary blood, tries to get the special vial of sanguinary priest blood that has a bit of Sanguinius in it.
He also kind of has a knock-on effect to a bunch of other characters. Like he saves Garrow's life in Flight of the Estevan. Like not the Estevan, you know what I mean? Eisen, whatever.
Eisenhorn,
yeah. Like, and I think that there's a couple of other characters who he saves.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he saves Lucius and he saves Eidolon for sure. Two big characters. He's recently pissed off Typhus because he stole that Arc Conjunctivus or whatever it was called. So the Death Guard are after him now. He's joined a Black Legion war band and like double crossed them. So there's plenty of stories about him out there if you want to get more detail. The Josh Reynolds, Guy Haley, and James Swallow all write a lot about him if you want more of his kind of this middle section of his story. I don't know if this is true, but James Swallow, who we interviewed, wish I'd known this before we interviewed him to check. He writes him as a bad guy in his Blood Angels trilogy. And apparently he petitioned GW to be allowed to kill him off.
Yeah.
And they said no. He said he's so evil, like what we've written about him is so bad, we should kill him. And they were like, nah, keep it, which is great. I love that.
Yeah.
We need someone this bad. But I guess that sense that he is becoming an emperor, becoming father to something else
But
is probably what Matt's going to tell us about.
Well, it's also kind of one of those things where, like, from his perspective in like the Black Library and stuff, it's also kind of he answers some questions as well that we have as readers, because we're like, oh, we know that people can like clone Space Marines and stuff. Why aren't they doing it? This kind of stuff, and he is doing it, and then they're getting killed by Abaddon or whatever. So it kind of like it does help fill in some of these, like the suspension of disbelief for you as a reader as well.
I think so.
I think he feels quite a good 40k grimdark niche. He's like we've mentioned a few horrible scientists, doctors, but he sort of is a mix of all of them, but all of the weird sci-fi films that you get where people are sort of grown for their organs and killed, and like there's various films and books where that sort of stuff happens, and it's quite a popular sci-fi genre, and he sort of fulfills that role, that niche quite well.
I've got quite a good quote from him here, which sort of supports that, which is if I am a monster, I am a monster on the right side of history, which I think is sort of sums him
Jesus Christ.
Sums up his kind of mentality completely, where it's just about, I mean, again, it's one of these things, isn't it, where people say like what you believe is really kind of determined by how you feel, in a way. We're getting very kind of out here now, but like he can say, I'm striving for all this, but we know that he likes hurting people. It just seems like he really likes torturing people, and he's managed to make like a massive kind of like, what do they call it, mental gymnastic leap to just do a bunch of science around just torturing people, which is what he's really about. At the end of the day, he's got a flesh coat on. That's not a lab coat. That's not hygienic.
He doesn't need it.
No.
Weirdly though, as you've said, for such a fleshed out character, and a character that does have a special place in a lot of people's heart for 40k and the original model, etc., he doesn't have a 30k model.
Oh, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, there's a Lucius one and all sorts. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was just an apothecary back then, though, working in secret in his secret little lab.
He's still. I mean, we mentioned a couple of books. Like, he was a main character. He was.
No, definitely. It is strange that he doesn't have one.
I think I wonder whether that's maybe because actually, although he's so fleshed out, there are very little scenes with him actually fighting. And the game is about fighting. You don't get.
It'd be a bit of a disappointing character on the battlefield. You just keep running off. Like you've got to roll a dice to see if he runs off and steals some gene seed from somewhere and does
Whereas his 40k character is quite good. Like he's got quite strong rules, but I think maybe it's taken him 10,000 years to get to the point where his medicine becomes a point that can sway a battle.
Yeah, well, and
jacking up people around him and stuff.
Yeah, and if we touch on that, like he there's rules that almost can make your entire army be about him.
I mean, it's the army I play. When I play Emperor's Children, I play Creations of Bile, which is his detachment. which just
So he-
give +1 strength and +1
Mm.
attacks, or it did in 9th edition.
Does
yeah.
he not at some point become the kind of de facto leader of the fallen Emperor's children?
Yeah, so that's that bit I was saying where they kind of he leads quite a lot of them for a while on that Harmony planet, and then it's
Hmm.
kind of tricked into like they like try and get him to, can you do this officially? And once he's
Yeah.
asked to do it, he's like, no, I'm at the door.
Again, it's kind of funny. I guess the Emperor's children, they're all so arrogant that none of them are really very good leaders, because you've got like Lucius
Yeah.
the Eternal as like when you think of as like the main it's not like Typhus or whatever for like Death Guard, is it? It's just like you've got these kind of characters, but they're all kind of working for their own shit. Like Lucius will disappear off and just like wank into a galaxy for a couple of years or whatever, isn't it? They
Yeah.
all just
I think
fucking,
Eidolon tries, but he's just a bit of a monster, and people just don't like him. I think part of being a leader is likability, right? And
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
all pretty unlikable.
Mm.
The only likable one is Sol Tarvitz, and he
He's
goes to
loyal.
his side.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a
Yeah,
loyal
yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Matt, I guess we've talked about like he wants to be an emperor. He wants to create like I think you've been looking at the new men and the creations that he actually does make.
Yeah. So this is so we're into near 40K now. He has access to a lot of gene seed, and he has this idea to create, I guess they're almost like alternative space marines, but they're also genetic creations that he can use as Sony sort of mentioned crews of his ships or gang members that go around with him, his like posse. They're just his alive experiments, and he calls them new men or Homo Novus, and they are in many ways the pinnacle of Bile's art and creations. They possess they're humans, but they possess a strength and intelligence above and superior to any human. Some maybe more than a space marine. So it's not clear. They're not like it's not in black and white that they're better than a space marine, but maybe some of them are and some of them aren't. I think we've mentioned a few times where sometimes it's almost like he does have a perfect creation, but some of his other creations are sort of flawed or or they don't go as according to plan. So I think some of them could be better than a space marine, and some of them could be almost falling apart.
Well, I mean, it certainly seems like because he does have a conversation with Cool about because Cool makes all these Primaris marines, and when they have a conversation in Gene Father, I think he basically says, "You're wrong." He sort of scolds Cool and says, "You're wrong for working with the Primaris gene seed with a Primarch gene seeds because I've experimented with them so many times and they've always ended up fucking up. So it's kind of like like doesn't matter what you do with this gene seed, it's always going to be imperfect." And his kind of solution to that is he says is to make something that starts as not quite finished. So I think these new men, they come out a bit half baked, if you will, and then the kind of their role is then sort of determined by him basically telling them what to do, or like and he thinks that that's a way of like finding perfection sort of thing.
He thinks the Primaris Marines are shit, basically.
He doesn't like them, no.
I think it's quite interesting for like I mean, it's my actual work to an extent, but it's like he's coming round to this idea that genetics isn't everything and environment shapes part of what you are. You need a combination of both, but it's taken him 10,000 years to get there. Whereas Cool is restricted by the rules to only work within a set of parameters.
Well, it's quite funny that Cool defends himself by saying he's only had 10,000 years to work on his project and that Fabius Bile has had way longer. And he sort of justifies it by saying that he's hit the brief because the Emperor needs an improvement on his soldiers, not the perfect soldier like Cool is looking for. So they kind of,
Yeah. But there's the insinuation is that there's also women. It's not just men that form this new man of Fabius Biles. Like they are, so there could be female new men, which is interesting with all the online arguments. But he secretly seeds them across the galaxy, so they're sort of hidden in dark places, potentially around the corner. and that he hopes that one day they'll almost replace humanity, which I think we mentioned at the beginning. He is literally trying to create a replacement for humanity.
An improvement, not just a
Yeah,
replacement.
an improvement. So naturally, wherever they're found, they are destroyed by the Inquisition, Adeptus Astartes, etc., and they are certainly hunted down. People hunt them down to
Just
try
like
and
the
destroy
people
them.
that say they want female space marines on Facebook. It all makes sense.
And we sort of also mentioned them before, but he creates these things called a gland hounds, which is it's a weird name, but they are human genetically altered humans, and they sort of hunt down space marines in packs to try to retrieve their gene seed for him. And they're sort of a weird, almost animal-like. They see Fabius as their god and their father, and that's also a bit like the relationship between a space marine and the emperor. And the first gland hound is called Igori, which is
like Igor.
Yeah,
Igori.
Igori. Where's it? Oh, it comes. So it's a pun. Igor's name is a pun on Igor, a character who serves as an assistant to Dr. Frankenstein and Count Dracula.
Yeah.
He's
Igor like. He's Igori.
Yeah, Igori.
Yeah.
But there's another one I read about called Emil Vargas, who ends up becoming a planetary governor of an imperial world that's taken over by Dark Eldar. So I assume that means that there's still humans alive. They're sort of the planet's enslaved, but this gland hound has become proto-governor of this like enslaved human world, which
It feels
is
so
quite
funny
interesting.
calling someone a gland hound. This gland hound has been like, oh, Margaret
milking
Thatcher,
those
what a
glands
gland
in no time.
hound.
But there's another thing I read about called a Terrata, which
That's a
are
Pokemon.
which are Pokemon created by Fabius Bile. The subjects willingly or unwillingly who undergo extensive genetic manipulation, and they are something that he started working on when he was the chief apothecary of the Emperor's Children.
These are like the lucky
Horus
dip
Heresy.
ones, right? Where like you get juiced up with something and you see what happens. These are the ones that are like
he gives it to people from like the Iron Hands and Salamanders, and it's just like a lucky dip.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
But that's
like when Meow Meow. You guys remember Meow Meow? A bit like that.
Orchid food.
Yeah.
Just gonna give you some orchid food.
But they all kind of form a bit of what he calls his new men, which I guess he continues to develop now into the 41st, 42nd millennium.
Yeah. The crazy thing now is that he's got access to, we think, all of 20 of the gene seeds from Alpha Primus or whatever whatever Belisarius calls Super Primaris Marine is, that's got all of the gene seed in, we think.
Yeah.
So he now has everything to play with potentially. I guess for the game, does that mean we see what I hope we don't see Primaris Chaos. I hope we see new men.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd love to see a proper fleshed out new man army that's got a bit of Space Marine to it, but isn't just big Chaos Space Marines.
Yeah, that would be really cool actually. Because I was thinking about this before the episode, and I thought, because I like the scale shift basically, I was like, I hope this means that they can like release, because Fabius Bile really kind of makes the point that, like I said before, that it's the gene seed itself that kind of corrupts them to chaos. So I thought like, oh well, that means that we could definitely have Primaris Chaos. Like he's definitely has the tools to make Primaris Chaos Marines. But yeah, it would be way cooler if they were just something new and not just the Primaris style chaosified like the old Space Marines were. So yeah, you've changed my mind.
Oh, excellent. I don't think they do that anyway, because the new Chaos Marines are bigger.
Yeah.
They're bigger than the old one. They're not,
but maybe that's because they're new men.
not as big.
Yeah. Or maybe the insinuation is there.
Yeah.
Well, I think that brings us right up to date with this body we've got in front of us, boys.
Well, I guess we've solved it then. The murder of Fabius Bile, done and dusted. I guess we'll not be seeing anything more from him again. Send him to the crematorium.
But at that moment, dear listener, there was a flash of lightning and a burst of thunder so violent it extinguished every candle in the room. By the time Frankenstone and Matt Gore had relit them, they saw no body on the slab. No cold corpse on Dr. Welsh's block. The spaceship was gone too, which left them all feeling quite strongly like they should have noticed that, but whatevs. All that remained was a note, written in blood on a piece of human leather that read as such.
If a man dedicates his life to good deeds and the welfare of others, he will die unthanked and unremembered. If he exercises his genius, bringing misery and death to billions, his name will echo down through the millennia for 100 lifetimes. Infamy is always more preferable to ignominy.
Welcome to this last part of the show. You know what time it is. Lords of Law. And I've been rummaging through the lost property bin and I found some stuff and I want you to tell me who it's used from. So this is war gear from around the 40K universe. And I want you to tell me who uses this war gear. It definitely has nothing to do that I was on the war gear section of Fabius Bile today and ended up finding more war gear I thought was cool. That is coincidental. So, who makes use of the Doom Glaive Dreadnought?
The Eldar.
No.
What are they called? The Golden Boys.
Custodes?
Yeah.
No.
The Death Watch?
No.
The Thousand Suns.
No.
Stumped at the first question.
Do you want me to give you a clue?
Yes.
What happens when we do real law?
Well, Matt, you mentioned some gold boys earlier. Imagine if there was like one less than a gold boy.
Silver Boys.
That's right. It's the Silver Boys, the Grey Knights, Matt. Who uses a Seeker missile?
Tau.
Tau, Matt. Some points. A Grav Talon.
Imperial Guard.
No.
Dark Eldar.
Oh, Dark Eldar, Matt. Sneaking in again.
Man.
An Eldritch Lance.
That's the Necrons.
Necrons, well she. Okay, so next question. An Ion Beamer.
Imperial Knights.
No. They're
The
new.
Tau again.
No, not Tau.
Votan.
Votan. That's
It's the same tech, I think.
Yeah, probably nicked it off there. They're so unmemorable, the Votan. It's like they never even came out now. I swear there should be, like, when a new faction comes out, everyone should be like, oh shit, a bunch of lore and all cool stuff. And it's just like, I've not heard anything about them.
Everyone's more excited about the crew than the entire Votan release.
It seems like that. Anyway, who uses an Eviscerator chainsaw?
Oh, the Sister Battle Repentia.
That's right, Sisters of Battle. Okay, what about this one? A Heavy Rock Cutter.
Gene Stealer Cult.
Gene Stealer Cult. I think Welsh should just pit
to be
that.
specific.
Okay.
Okay.
The Heart Ripper Autocannon.
Is it Ripper spelt PPA? I'm going to go Orcs.
No, afraid not.
Space Marines.
That's
Death Watch.
Very broad of you, Matt, but
Ultramarines.
no.
It's going to be Chaos Space Marine then, surely.
It is Chaos Space Marines, but in particular, one faction of
Heart
Chaos
Ripper,
Space.
Slaneshi ones.
No,
Oh.
that's what I thought at first as well.
Black Legion.
No,
The Corn ones.
Corn. Well, there. Okay, who uses a servo arm?
A Tech Marine.
Tech Marine. Matt, well done. Okay, but that brings us on to the final question, which, as you guys know, is worth 7 quadrillion points. And that is, whose favourite weapon is the shovel?
Krieg.
Deathcore Krieg.
Krieg, well, tipping it at the end. That's all we've got time for today. Let's say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
We'll see you next
my
time.
web skin.